guys, Stu here. And today we're talking about a film which I don't really think anyone really asked for, but we got it because that's just 2018 in cinema for you. And that film is Sicario 2 Soldado, or as I believe it's been called in the States, Day of the Soldado. One of those things where they just decided to whack in a couple more words depending on where it's being released. So I wasn't really excited, but I was certainly interested to see where this might go and how this might turn out. And after seeing it, it's a very strange mixed bag for me. There's things that definitely surprised me in how effective it actually ended up being, but then there's also things which, as I kind of feared, were problematic in this whole kind of let's make a big franchise out of Sicario style thing. We've got Josh Brolin and Benicio del Toro returning, and I've got to be honest, they're good, they're solid. I mean, they're great characters from the first one. The essential plot of this one is that the government's like, hey, we need you to go and start a kind of civil war between these cartels in Mexico for our own political gain there. So that's what's getting them back on board in here. I was interested to see how they'd do that because I couldn't really get a huge amount of that from the trailers. But it is good to see those two cast members returning from the first one just because they're great actors and I like seeing them in whatever work they're doing. But the direction here comes from a dude called Stefano Sollima, who I've not seen any of his previous work before this. I believe he works a lot in television. But I think actually on the whole, I was surprised at how effective his direction was for the most part in this film. And there are actually sequences which, although they're not to the level of Denis Villeneuve, which we'll get into a little bit, I actually think they were effective and did do a good job at building some tension and suspense in sequences. There's actually a really good one where they're sort of in this convoy of, they're not tanks, but they're like, you know, armoured vehicles trying to get a girl from A to B. And the camera's inside this vehicle, sort of 360 spinning around. It does a really good job of slowly turning to reveal things in frame. Really does do a good job of amping the tension up there. I thought that was a really well executed sequence and probably my favourite in the film. And there's a couple of those dotted throughout. I'm not sure who the cinematographer was on this one, but they do a very good job in its own thing here. I mean, it's got some great shots in there. There's some really good aerial view stuff in there. But overall, it's noticeably not quite as well shot as the first Sicario. But I was surprised to see that there are moments where the cinematography did shine a little bit. I was expecting it to just feel like someone trying to do their best Roger Deakins impression from the first one, and at points it kind of is that, but I was happy to see that it sort of did its own thing, and it did its own thing quite well at points. And that's actually the main thing that surprised me that I took from at least the first kind of half of this film. At first, I wasn't really on board. I had to do a bit of work to get me on board just because I'm not immediately down for a Sicario sequel. I didn't need that, I didn't have to see it, and the trailers didn't do any favours selling this one to me. And when you're in that mindset, it's easier to be like, this just isn't as good as what it was doing in the first one. But then it actually sort of came into its own, and as it gets going, the story of this one kind of sucked me in a little bit. And as I said, there's certain sequences I was like, that's actually really great. That is a genuinely great sequence. But at the same time, at the back of my head, I couldn't help but feel like pretty much everything that I loved so much and which made the first Sicario so unique and interesting was kind of gone here. It's not really there anymore. Yeah, it feels tense, and yeah, it feels dark, and it's not afraid to show big, brutal acts of violence. But it doesn't really feel like it comes at it in the same way that Denis Villeneuve did in the first one. But on the whole, I enjoyed the first half. Then we get to the end of this film, and it quickly kind of falls into a lot of the fears and problems that I was worried we'd be getting with a Sicario 2. Which is namely that it just suddenly becomes an attempt at a big franchise, which I just don't feel like Sicario ever needed to be. It feels like the story's going through as just, you know, you'd expect a regular thriller to do. You feel like you're going to be getting somewhere and you feel like the character's going to come to a head. And then it quickly kind of ditches that in favour of leaving it more open-ended so that we can just see where it picks up in the third one. So ultimately, it just feels a little bit like you don't get an ending, or that they just couldn't be asked to do an ending for this one. They were like, we'll just work it out in the third one. And it's all the more annoying that you feel like you're getting through about an hour and a half of this film and you're like, okay, I think you've got me. I think you've got, oh no. Just gonna fucking milk it for another one, aren't you? It's going somewhere and then it just gets very messy, and as a result of that, the whole thing just feels messy and inconsequential. And there are some big kind of plot things that happen in the final act which just, I mean, really? I mean, you'll know exactly what I mean if you've seen the film and when you see the film. But there's a point where you're like, oh, they did that. This is quite dark. I don't really know where this is going to go. I'm kind of excited for this. And then, honestly, as if, like, fucking clockwork, Mr. fucking Hollywood comes in and immediately sucks you straight out of it. And you can just feel the atmosphere within an audience watching this film change almost immediately at that point. And from then on out, you just kind of lost me. And there are certain places that they take these characters to towards the end of this film, which I guess are arguably surprising knowing where they came from in the first one, but I actually do think kind of makes some sense, and I mean, at least from like a narrative storytelling side of things, certainly makes sense in setting up an antagonist and protagonist. So that's where it becomes way too kind of cliche and conventional, where the first Sicario kind of avoided all of that. In a film like Sicario, where it's so interested in this kind of grey area and morally ambiguous stuff going on, it's all the more disappointing to see it devolve into this much more kind of clean-cut black and white route of looking at things. But that being said, Benicio del Toro he's a badass still. He is just still a fucking badass. And he's pushing a lot of boundaries in ways of shooting people. What's that? I couldn't tell you. Looks fucking cool though. But yeah, overall it's a really strange one, this. I think it does work more than I thought it would work, considering I didn't think it would work at all. But it does feel incredibly deceptive in its setup of a franchise. There's a point where the rug is swept out from underneath you, and you're like, oh, that's where we're at. That's why we're here. But it is no way near as well executed as the first Sicario. So, I don't know. If you like the first Sicario, out of interest, I recommend checking out the new one. But I truly don't believe we need Sicario sequels. I don't think we need a third one. It's gonna happen now, clearly. But what about you guys? Have you seen Sicario 2 Soldado yet? It's out over here in the UK tomorrow. So if you do check it out, let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. How does it compare to the first one? And are you on board for this I'm assuming it'll be a trilogy, but maybe it'll be a full Sicario franchise down the line. Who knows? Are you on board with it? Do you not like what they're doing? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to know. And as usual, if you like this video and you want to see me talk about more shit, please do consider clicking subscribe. Really helps me out, but also means that you won't miss any future reviews as they come in your sub feed. So click subscribe or that fun little bell button. It's up to you. Do what you want. I'm off to read up on how to hopefully never get into Benicio del Toro's bad books. I don't ever want to see him looking down a gun at me. Only smiles, please, Benicio. But until next time, stay beautiful, mother truckers.